Hello, John Briggs here. I'd like to read part 3 of my introduction to the book of poetry called Prose Kills. It's available on Amazon, or you can purchase it from a publisher with in stock. So this is part 3 of the introduction to that book. So what exactly is a poem, and why should a poet want to write it? One word: access. Let me give you an example from my own experience. As an undergraduate, I wrote a paper for an English class explaining why I no longer considered myself a poet. To do so, I sat down at a table in the college library and created a mental image of the world and the poet's place in it. What I came up with was this: the world is a collection of atoms in colloidal suspension, sloshing around inside a washing machine. The washing machine is traveling through time and space and spinning on its axis. Finally, the washing machine tumbles as it does so. The poet sits at the center of the washing machine and navigates the different motions until he stands outside of time and space where nothing moves, and he takes the hand of the eternal. This connection is brief. As the washing machine moves, the coordination between the motions breaks down, and the poet is pulled back inside it. The above paragraph looks and smells like prose. There are no poetical conceits of language, no rhythm, no rhyme, no line breaks, no elevated language. Just the straightforward, no-nonsense progression from thought A to thought B. But something unexpected happened when I finished writing the paragraph and looked up from the page. The entire room, the stacks of books, the tables, the carols with students in them bending over their assignments, spun slowly around me. Startled, I blinked and shook my head until the swirling stopped. As I sat there, I asked myself, can I do that again? To find out, I put my head down and concentrated again on my image of the poet sitting at the center of a swirling world. When I looked up, the room was spinning again. That's when I realized I had cracked open a door and was standing on the threshold between our skinny world of chaos and decay and the fat world of the eternal. I would like to tell you that I entered the fat world and had a good talk with the immortals, but I didn't. Instead, I finished the paper on why I was no longer a poet and handed it in. It came back from the professor with the remark written in red: "You're doing what poets do." I relate this story for 3 reasons. The first is to demonstrate that not all paragraphs are prose, and not all verse is poetry. The business that the piece of writing is carrying out determines whether it is poetry. And the business of poetry is to grant access to a world outside our own that is otherwise inaccessible. And this flies in the face of a great many contemporary poems that are themselves inaccessible. It's as if the reader needed a pre-poem to crack open the door to these. My second point is that poetry and prose are violent acts, but the kingdoms they assail are different. Poetry assaults the fat world, the kingdom of heaven, while prose attacks the skinny one, the kingdom of earth. The results of these assaults are as different as the kingdoms they assault. Poetry cracks open a door to another world. Prose manipulates things in the existing one. Poetry, the act of creating something new, builds a bridge that allows commerce between the fat world and the skinny one. Prose limits itself to the allocation and movement of resources in the skinny one. Poetry is an expansive and open-ended work, a work of the spirit and soul. Prose is a reductive and restrictive work of the ego that only sees a world of lack. Poetry creates 12 baskets of leftovers from 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Prose ignores the mystery and fights over the leftovers. Finally, the fat world wants to be discovered. If it does not invite assault, neither does it actively defend against it. The skinny world, on the other hand, is impenetrable and repels every assault against it. The fat world reveals its depth. The skinny one hides its thinness. Let me use an analogy to illustrate the difference. Poetry writes an acorn, breaks the surface of the ground, and inserts the acorn into the soil where it is dark and moist. There it waits for the mystery to take place. Underground, the seed begins to germinate, to die as an acorn, and to become an oak. Prose, on the other hand, tries to get at the mystery by cutting through the surface of the acorn until it becomes a pile of tiny pieces, each with a surface of its own, and the mystery is nowhere to be found. In other words, poetry reveals the mystery by letting the acorn die. Prose loses the mystery by killing the acorn.